All right, everybody. Welcome to Shally's Alley. It is Friday, June 30th, the last Friday of June, the last Shally's Alley of June 2023. Welcome, everybody. Today we have a special guest, Rachel Cupples. Rachel, did I say that right?
You
Couples?
did, Rachel Cupples.
Couples, just like couples, right?
Yes.
And Rachel is a specialist in recruiting for diversity. She actually is currently the only recruiter at Textio. Rachel actually reports to a friend of mine, Jackie Clayton, who many of you may recognize her name. And Rachel is currently handling all of the recruitment for Textio, which is, if you don't mind me saying, kind of a cool app. Definitely one of those like everyone must have type of apps, right? I think.
Yeah, our software is, I am biased, that is for sure. But
No problem there.
anytime you're moving bias from language or, it's a very cool thing.
Yeah. So what it does for those of you that don't know is it analyzes the language in your job posting or in your emails and communication, and it identifies if there's any bias, whether it be gender or otherwise, and it will help. It'll make suggestions on how to rewrite it. What it doesn't do is it doesn't write it for you because it still wants the voice of the recruiter and the company brand and everything. But it does tell you if it's missing something or has too much of something so that it can make it either more neutral or if you intend to have a bias on purpose, which can also sometimes make sense. It helps you with that. Um, but Rachel comes to us with lots of experience in the staffing industry. Been a branch manager at some staffing firms, was a director at a corporate staffing function, and is now kind of in the full desk recruiter and does some sourcing as well. And of course, when you're the one man shop or one woman shop, also the reporting and everything else. So we wanted to talk a little bit about today what keeps Rachel up and things that she's obsessed with are candidate experience, inclusion, and diversity. Right. So those are some of the things that Rachel is passionate about. If you have any questions, put them in the chat.
I'm
I
sorry.
am.
Can I add something, Shally? I appreciate
Please.
you, talking about Textio, but we launched Textio Lift towards the end of last year, which is using the same. It's using that same AI, removing bias from language, but it's for performance feedback, helping
I never knew that. Didn't know
employers
that.
and HR teams not only provide unbiased feedback, but really, provide actionable unbiased feedback. So,
Wow, that's pretty cool. On when you're writing your reviews or
yeah,
peer
employee
reviews,
reviews.
recommendations. That's pretty
Absolutely,
cool. Yeah,
it is.
that's excellent. So, Rachel, you're concerned about the candidate experience,
Yes.
and I'm concerned as in like something that you think a lot about, you care a lot about.
Mhm.
Um, can you share with us what's been happening lately with the candidate experience? Like, what are you seeing right now? Is kind of the shift or the trend that you're experiencing with the candidate experience right now?
Absolutely. And being a recruiter, and talking to job seekers all day long, whether they're candidates, prospects, just job seekers in general, I want to, acknowledge I have a very, and recruiters have a very unique seat, right? Because
Yeah.
we get a real time look into the job market and what's happening to job seekers. What I'm seeing currently, especially around tech, whether it's for corporate roles or tech roles, is a lot of what we saw in 2020 in other industries, minus the fear of not understanding what a global pandemic is. Now we, we have some time, under our belt as far as understanding, you know, the impacts, of something like COVID-19. But the tech industry wasn't, as we know, it wasn't as impacted like other industries were in 2020. So I'm seeing a lot of and hearing a lot of fear from job seekers. There's more job seekers out there around tech than seems like there are job openings. And there's a lot of competition. There's also concerns around salary and what salaries are now in the tech industry compared to what a lot of the larger organizations had the opportunity to do in 2020 was, hire anybody they wanted, and they were paying more, not just for recruitment, sourcers, and HR, but really across many different, fields of work. And
Let's dive into that particular point a little bit, because I think that is really tied to the candidate experience.
Mhm.
There's chatter amongst TA leaders and recruiting leaders that some of the companies that had more funding or
Mhm.
were wealthier, that could afford to do this, instituted a retention strategy of paying people above market in order to keep them from leaving during COVID,
Mhm.
for various reasons. And it's they essentially are the claim is that they overpaid to keep people, and that is now kind of circling back and hurting those very same people that they retained, because now when they've been laid off, their cost of living, their lifestyle, their expectations have escalated to that higher level of pay. But normal, regular, everybody else can't afford to pay the same.
Mhm.
So is that is that legit in your experience, and how is that affecting the candidate experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is something that I think about a lot as well. One of the many reasons I came to Textio had to do with how we look internally at pay equity, and
Oh,
before it was in a law in specific states, we had that transparency, sharing ranges, and then target ranges if there were target ranges on our live on our job posts. Um, I'm I'm You're absolutely right. I agree with you. I can see it from both sides. I see it from, the employer side, the organization side, but I also can see from the job seeker side. There's a lot of differences in the world and the job market today compared to 2020 and 2021 when that was happening. As far as support and resources for job seekers
mhm.
and the unemployed, um, as well as inflation and what is just going on in the overall market, in the United States. So
Okay, so that's an interesting point. Sorry to jump in, but I know that, and for those of you that are listening, I'm not being rude.
no, not at all.
Rachel is neurodiverse, and one of the things that she asked me about prior to the show is that, she said, if she tends to kind of um, go too far into a
Right.
direction, that I should jump in, and I told her I would be happy to facilitate.
Thank
So
you.
please understand, everyone who's listening, I'm not being rude to Rachel. Rachel
Not at all.
specifically asked me to jump in. So I like what you just said, and I want to kind of pull the thread
Please.
on that one a little bit, which is around the inflation. So,
Mhm.
the argument that we just discussed was
Mhm.
companies that overpaid as a retention strategy,
Mhm.
and now those people who are looking for work are worried, because they're worried that their expectations are too high for other companies. But what you just said is that inflation is sort of catching up. So in other words, maybe they were overpaid at the time, but
Mhm.
because inflation, that is not that big a difference. So maybe they're still a little overpaid, but because inflation,
Yeah, and
it's sort
I,
of, so maybe that's the adjustment.
I, I don't know why it bothers me to say overpaid, because I think for a lot of years, many, especially specific, types of work and industries have been notorious for underpaying folks. But there definitely was a strategy of, let's pay to keep people. Um, I also want to mention that this inflation doesn't only impact job seekers, it's also impacting these business, a business, an organization. So it's it's twofold. Like, if I'm a job seeker, I want to know that I am not going to end up on the street and that I can feed myself and my family, just as a bare minimum. And, as an employer, uh, you're trying to keep the lights on, keep people employed, make sure they have the best benefits, hopefully, as possible, and, all of the tools that you need, and they need. And it's this is why this keeps me up at night. Candidate experience, and this part of it specifically does keep me up at night, because it, not to look at it, negatively, but it's kind of like, how do we win, And so I really believe that, how we start to win is through pay transparency. Making employers
Okay.
need to just keep it real, and regardless of whether it's law in your county, state, or city, like, start posting those full ranges.
I
um,
understand what you're saying, and I have always been an advocate of candidate experience from way before it was
yeah.
cool. And I'm
Mhm.
only saying that because my job has been sourcing for more
Right.
than 20 5 years, closer to 27 years. And as a sourcer, I live on candidates that we are inviting
Right.
to apply, which is very, so for me, candidate experience wasn't a nice to have, it was an absolute
You have
must
to.
have. Because if we invite if I asked you to the dance,
Mhm.
gender neutral here,
Right.
but if I invited you to the dance or invited you to the party and then you
Mhm.
get there and it's a crap experience, it's twice as insulting. If you find my company and you apply and you have a crap experience, it's like, okay, this happens a lot, HR black hole, and so many candidates have bad experiences that it's improving, but it's almost kind of like standard. But if I specifically invited you and then invited you to have a bad experience, it's like, okay, wow,
Ah,
really? You know, it
that's
makes it worse, right?
That's like worst nightmare. I one of my a fear that I have, or it's sort of like that first day of school thing, and no one's going to like you, or you show up to a dance and you're wearing the same outfit as someone else. But like, my fear around recruitment and sourcing is that, say we provide the best candidate experience, we make the offer and they start, and then they come back 30, 60, 120 days in and say, Rachel, this is not what you said it was. This
Oh, you're now
culture.
talking about it's the onboarding. So you have
I'm talking about
the
the whole
the
experience, like.
attraction,
Mhm,
the candidate experience attract the onboarding is like after. There's another,
mhm.
the employee experience. um but let me, eh, I want to return to the pay transparency.
Yeah, please.
I am actually responsible for creating this at my current organization, and we have a system that publishes jobs that has built-in pay transparency rules that makes it technically, as in from a technology point of view,
Mhm,
much more easy.
mhm.
It's a system that enables us to be able to do it, but we still have a problem. In other words, we can do this technically,
Right.
but we haven't been able to do it because there's an issue with um, there not being consistent messaging around pay transparency. So let me explain what I'm
Yes.
saying. I understand the benefit of pay transparency.
Mhm,
I don't like the fact that employers are, in some states, being required to share the pay rate, and then also not allowed to ask a candidate for what they're making, despite the fact that we would still find that out anyway. And despite the fact that, so it's essentially a one-way street. Like, they want employers to share the range, but they don't want candidates to share their pay. So it seems a little one-sided. However, here's the problem. and I get that we're trying to fix that, but here's the real problem. The bottom of this is if I post the compensation range
Mhm.
for a position, that is going to sometimes create um, dissent amongst employees
Yeah.
that have not been recently hired who have a different pay range, because when someone sees a range, and this is myself included, if the job posted says 80 to 90,000,
Mhm.
I only read 90,000. I don't read 80. If the job posting says 60 to 90,000, I only read 90,000. If the job posting says 0 to 90,000, all I'm reading is 90,000. And that's the top of the range. Now, I may feel that I deserve the top of the range, but that doesn't mean that I am qualified for that. That doesn't necessarily mean that I am the best candidate. So when someone applies for that, they're expecting 90,000, not understanding that it's a range. And when someone works at that company and they see it's posted 80 to
Mhm.
90 and they're making 80, now they're going, well, I should be getting paid 90. Well, maybe, but you're in the range of 80 to 90. Are you really the
Yeah.
90,000 range?
I'd love to speak on this.
So speak
Uh,
on that, and then I have another one for you.
yeah. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that I know it's tough for employers to level set, but really, uh, at the end of the day, if the reason an employer is not posting their ranges is because their current staff is not being paid equitably, like that, needs to be addressed. Um, the
That's not what I said.
the
Remember,
world, no,
if the range is 80 to 90
right,
and I am getting paid 80, it is
right.
equitable. But
What
human instinct is I
I'm with
should get
you.
the
I'm
90.
following you. Like, just
Give
1 second, and I promise I'll get to
me
it.
the 90.
Um, one of the very first things that I discuss with job seekers, so we do post our entire ranges, and oftentimes we have target ranges within, you may have a range from, say, 50,000 to 100,000 as an example,
Yep.
That's a huge range.
That
Like,
was my
and
other.
and you're
That's
absolutely
great.
right. I'm going to be everyone hopefully has the confidence within their skills and goes for that top number. So hopefully organizations are posting their target ranges as well. Regardless of how they decide to post, here's where it really is. I believe it's the responsibility of the recruiter in that first call, or or
Yep.
the sourcer in their outreach, whether they have a
Which is the first call.
conversation
Yep.
or it's in an email, however they're, getting to folks. In your first call as a sourcer or recruiter, um, we are responsible to start this conversation. We should not put the onus on job seekers or candidates. Like, it's our responsibility. So if I was talking to, if you're a candidate for one of my roles right now, I'm going to set expectations. We hire in 9 US states. My first, question is just confirming that they're, reside in a state I can hire in. And my very next question actually starts with a statement. I don't want to assume that they read the range or the full range or the target range. I tell them what was posted. I tell them the target range. And then I ask them if that target range is acceptable and explain that that's the true floor and ceiling. Say the target range is of that 50 to 100 is 65 to 75, a year for somebody to start. I let them know that this is the full range, but the truth, I can't bring in anybody less than 65, and there's no negotiating past 75. I don't want to waste your time. I value your time and your experience. I saw your resume. But is that an acceptable, range for you to start?
Right. And
For
that's, I think, a very good way to do it, because if it isn't, that's, hey, great, thanks for being honest. And I've had that conversation.
Mhm.
So I understand that it's the posting that is misleading. And so I get that the responsibility is on that first call, which is how we're handling it. And right now, we can't post it. And I'll tell you why. We'd like to, but um, there's a problem with the politicians and lawmakers that have decided that these are the rules. They have said that we must post, but they have never defined what an appropriate range is. So,
Well, and
thinking
that's,
about devil's advocate, we could
yeah,
say that this job pays from 0 to $10 million, and we've posted the range.
and I've seen
I
that.
mean,
And
that's malicious compliance,
no, I
right?
literally see that on LinkedIn all day long. And I'd
And
love to
that's
address
not helpful. Yeah,
that, and,
please.
and something you said earlier. when we're talking about, and I want to just preface, I am not a compensation
Neither am
analyst,
I. We're
or,
sourcers, but we're the first
but I get to
call.
work with some,
We are the first call. We
yeah,
have that call.
but I also get to work with and know some very talented folks, within HR and people, and specifically around compensation analyzation. But at the end of the day, we shouldn't be hiring, when we're looking at salary and we're looking at, okay, what is the range? It doesn't matter what someone made before. If I made $100,000 a year as an entry level recruiter with 6 months experience, that doesn't, at one company, that doesn't mean at another company that that's what I'm going to get paid, because it's all about this,
That's
the
happening
the
now.
role and responsibilities and
Right.
the work itself. Because you can have someone, I hate saying overqualified, because that, I believe, falls into this trap that has a lot to do with like age
I've been
bias and
overqualified,
things
right?
like that.
I
But
get that. I
you could
understand.
you could have a ton of experience. I was a director of talent acquisition, and
But you still
partnerships,
wanted this job.
and I'm an individual contributor here, and it's what
Nobody
I
forced
wanted.
you. Right. Yeah,
No,
this was
it's
your
like, this
choice.
is
Right.
like dream. This is literally, I tell candidates all day long, this is my dream job.
And it's nobody's business whether you took a pay cut to
No,
get the job or not.
absolutely not. And at
Yeah.
the end of the
I
day,
get that.
um, from the business side, it's not level setting to the person you're hiring, which a lot of that has happened. You get really excited and you're like, oh, I love this person. And we saw that a lot in 2020. And like you said, they're paying to retain or paying to gain talent, rather than taking a look at, what the actual role is and what is truly equitable, across the organization and for a role like that. At Textio, we look at, I say we, but our talented, leaders in HR and DEI and TA are looking at salaries, and making sure they're equitable, and within, tracking with the market,
Right.
at
Yeah.
least
Right.
twice
And
a
that's
year.
another that's not our job, that's another job. But yeah, for sure.
Right. But if that job isn't done, so I just want to acknowledge what you're saying. Like, I don't,
Hmm.
it's on everybody. It's on the
Right.
recruiter in
Right.
that first call. It's on, and it needs to come from
Having a
the
good
top. It has
compensation
to come
team.
from the top.
Yep. Absolutely. So the reason I'm bringing up these points is because these are some of the problems that we have to try to solve as an organization. It's not like I can just me, Shally, I can just hit the button on the at ATS and say, "Hey, great, we're doing pay transparency." Because if I don't have if I don't have the proper comp ranges, as you just said,
Mhm.
then it's just going to be a nightmare because we're going to cause internal equity problems. We're going to cause candidate misexpectations because the ranges will be off. They're going to be like, "What? I'm not going to. That's too low for the market." There's all kinds of problems.
Well, and especially
We
when
have to align, is what I'm saying.
when organizations are using a product like Textio to write, either their uh, you know outreach email, reaching out to prospects, or to write their job posts. It undermines, if recruiters do not know, at least whether you're posting it or not, whether it's law or
Mhm,
not, if
mhm.
recruiters don't have an understanding of what the full range is and then what the target range is within that, and some sense of leveling based on experience, um, it's it's a no-win situation for recruiters. And so
Right.
that's why I want to acknowledge, like, I live in the special world that is Textio as an employee here, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging from all aspects are top of mind. We're not
Right.
only
And you're saying pay transparency addresses some of the gaps between the pay gap,
right.
right?
And I'm
Whether it's
saying that, like,
gender
I
or
I
yeah,
realize, like, at tech, in it's coming from a place of privilege, working for a place like Textio, that already
mhm,
we already have our stuff together.
right. You
In
already
this
have good
in this
comp and yeah.
Yes,
That's what we're saying is that you kind of need to have your stuff
you
together
do, you
in
do.
order to comply. So that's the laws are there in some states and they're going to be in more and more states. Everybody
Yes,
knows that. So we sort of have to catch up now. Those organizations that don't have it together and don't have the bands quite yet. And I'm going
right.
to throw one more
Please.
monkey wrench in, and this is the last one I promise
No, I love
about this
this.
topic, which is um, regional. changes. So if I have, again, I'll go to my 80 to 90.
Mhm,
If my pay range is 80 to 90
mhm.
and my job is in Atlanta, that's fine. But this, partly because of COVID, is becoming a problem. More and more organizations are switching to a remote first culture where they're allowing people to work from anywhere in the country, which
Yep.
is really good for a lot of people that otherwise wouldn't have these opportunities, including neurodiverse and people with disabilities and other
Mhm,
kinds of candidates that would not have been available before. So
mhm.
it's good for everyone that we have remote work, but the cost of living in Atlanta and the cost of living in LA are different. So 80 to 90 would be adequate for that band in Atlanta. And if I posted at 80 to 90, people in LA are going to say, "Oh, heck no, that's, I make twice as much." And they
Yeah.
should. So now if I post it in Atlanta and it's a remote job, and someone in LA sees it because it's a remote job, right? And think about the opposite. I posted in LA and it's 160,000. Someone in Atlanta sees it and it's a remote job. They're thinking, "Oh, I could be making 160." Sorry, no, it's in your region, it's adjusted. So now think about, how am I going to post that job? I have to post a band for every state. That's not going to work. Even better, in some states, different counties have different regulations
Oh my gosh,
and different cost of
California.
living, and in different counties, different
Yeah,
cities, right? Like in
yeah,
Atlanta, the cost of living is one thing, and in North Atlanta, so now
yeah.
we have this really
Mhm.
complex system that's requiring us to post a range locally when we have a wide open remote job. How do we solve that?
So, first, I want to say I don't have the be all end all answer. I think this is a conversation that needs to
Right.
happen more often, but I
We're
will,
having this. Yep.
and it needs to continue to happen after, after today. But
Oh no, we're
it's if
solving this now, and
employers,
that's it.
yeah, if
Conversations.
employers, I like to get stuff done, Shally. I
Let's
mean,
do it. We're solving pay transparency right now.
but no, if employer, I mean, there's a lot of ifs. Like if when you're
Yeah.
looking at pay, right? And say you hire in all 50 states, or say you hire in, 5 states,
Hmm.
there's a decision employers need to make. Do they want to pay regionally and deal with potential inequities of, like, there's a whole lot of privilege that, like, as an example, I live in the greater Seattle area, which it's the cost of living here is much different than, say, um, Atlanta,
Jacksonville,
Dallas,
Florida, or whatever. Right.
Chicago, wherever you want to look
Hmm.
at.
That's fair.
And but also, if I lived in, let's say, Chicago, why wouldn't I deserve that same amount of pay? Because
I'll tell you what.
I have the
You
same,
don't.
I'm just
You don't.
just from a job seekers, but, like,
You don't deserve it, and here's why.
because of my
Because
experience lines up with someone else, and maybe I was born in an area that maybe
mhm,
is not booming in tech, that maybe I don't have the privilege or resources to even move to.
mhm,
Um, so that's why I think employers, when they're looking at comp in general, need to look at it um, from either a mid or higher range. And this is my opinion, the
I
how you
understand what you're
solve this.
saying, but
Because for someone
it
like me, gosh, I uh, wouldn't be. I'm not. I'd be able to retire sooner if I moved to the country.
is
But I
that
live.
then fair for someone who
You know,
can't retire until much later because they live in a higher, you see what I'm saying? So let
right?
me let me add one thing to
Like,
that, because,
it's no win.
well, actually,
Tell me how
there's
it
a,
is.
I don't know about the win, I don't know about the
Mhm,
fix, but I can tell you that if we're going to solve this problem
mhm,
of, um, first of all, let me back up and explain the problem. The problem is that, um, it, hiding pay and asking people for compensation creates inequities. So,
mhm.
not asking people for their current compensation
Yeah,
eliminates some of that, and being transparent about our pay eliminates some of that as well. However, if we're going to solve this for the future, and I don't want to solve this problem for today and then
right.
have to solve it again for the future, we
Absolutely.
truly are moving towards a global economy.
Right.
So, what happens is, if someone who is perfectly able to do the job and well qualified in Jakarta, and someone is equally qualified in Seattle, the same candidate, only difference is that they are located in one city versus the other,
Mhm.
right? If I pay someone in an extremely low cost of living region the same as someone in other, that is creating a huge inequity in that region. So we do have to figure out how to adjust for this, because we need to, unless there's some kind of common currency, which is not, we tried that, right? Bitcoin
Yeah.
or whatever, it didn't work.
Gosh, don't get me started on that.
The euro or whatever. We've tried
Yeah,
that several
I
times. We have to adjust for that, because otherwise it's going to become it's a big problem now just within US states, and even within a state, different cities. Imagine once we start looking at the entire world and pay transparency there, then we're going to have a big problem, because I would be very happy making $10,000 in a small, in a small country where that's the same as $100,000 here, because it buys me the same comfort, luxury, safety, all the things that I want. So it's equivalent. So you have to equivalate the
But
currency.
it's not. That's the thing. It's not. Like you and I mean, I have to we are both two white adults in America today,
I'm
right?
Hispanic,
You know. Oh, Hispanic, I apologize.
also Jewish.
Myself, I am a white woman, regardless of whether I
I'm
have a
not a woman.
disability or not.
Hmm.
We
Yeah,
have to remember that, people of color and underrepresented communities are disproportionately affected by these things. This goes back. I mean, I could go forever on this,
that's
Shally.
how we define it here in the United States, but
Right.
in the
I'm
rest of
talking
the
about,
world,
yeah. I realize you're talking
it's,
globally, but
yeah,
here in the US,
it's very different. Yeah,
um, there are opportunities that have not been afforded to people.
correct. And we're
And
trying to solve
so
that now here in the US.
we are.
But
And
if
a
we
lot of
solve
that
it
has to
here
do,
and then we have to solve it again
right.
globally, we're going to have,
Well, what
we'll
I'm saying is
we'll
just
fix
that
it now
pay
and then we have to fix it again.
transparency and, uh,
Mhm.
a concentrated effort, and not just effort, but doing the work in DEIB is what we have to do
Yep.
pay transparency is a part of it, as well as you can be transparent all day long, but if you're not paying equitably and
Well,
reasonably.
yeah, the whole point is that that was my point, is that it would
Mhm,
be equitable. So $10,000 there would be equitably the same as
mhm,
$100,000 here. So
mhm,
let's not get stuck on the number, but on what the number represents. And so that is a different kind of equity. It
mhm.
means the same access. And in that part of the world, they don't have the same definition for diversity. So I'm thinking globally and I'm thinking very much
Yeah,
ahead. Let me show you a question from the audience,
please.
and I'm gonna put it up here for you to read, because I know you need time to um, think about that. It says, any recommendations on how to make these? Oh, sorry. It says how to make these improvements along with continuing to partner with recruiters. And while you think about that, I want to explain to the audience where we are and how we got here.
Yeah.
We are at a point where we agree pay transparency is important and necessary, and companies are having to do it because of the law, but it's also the right thing to do. My suggestion isn't that we comply with the law. My suggestion is that we do better than that. My suggestion is that we comply with the universal standards. So rather than solving for how do we post salaries in California for California and obey that law, why not think of a solution that's going to solve it for everyone? So I propose this. I propose that we say this is our band, and if you are in a higher or lower cost of living, this band will adjust according to the equity that this describes. And then we go back to Rachel's very first point, which was explain it on the call. So, hey, this is our band, but if you live in a twice more expensive city, that is going to flex, and so on. So we can still address it, have the pay transparency, and have the clarity using both solutions, because Rachel's idea of or suggestion, recommendation that this should be on the first call is a really good solution for it, because it will dispel all of those misunderstandings and discrepancies. So that's how we arrived here. And we're not talking about anything that is controversial. We are on the same page. It's just that when we think about globally, the solutions are not going to apply if we try to solve by the state. In other words, if we post California law equivalent and then all of a sudden Colorado changes it, Think about this. Colorado might require that there is actually a range of X%, and California doesn't. Now we have to, so let's not just keep chasing the law. Let's just do it right, is my
Right,
point.
across the board. And that
Yeah,
is,
that's kind of what I'm saying. Yep.
yeah, and I've been speaking, in all transparency for anybody listening in, from a, the US. I currently recruit
Right.
out of 9, US
Right.
states, and do not recruit internationally. This is a big thing to solve for, whether we're talking about in the United States or globally. And I just like to add, like, if we wait to solve it either in the US or globally, the work's not going to get done. So, I mean,
Right.
the
You got to
ownership
start
is
somewhere.
on the ownership is on, employers one by one to level set internally, get that pay equity, so the
Right. Start with getting your
objection,
pay
yeah,
equity internally right,
get that
then
internally
get compensation to put in the work to get the right ranges,
for those
then
internal
look at,
folks, and
yeah,
then start hiring. And I realize
and then be transparent with clarity on that first call.
right, and I realize that is a lot. I don't want to dismiss the cost and everything that employers go through with having
Yeah.
to level set like that. But to survive in where the market, especially the job market and the world of work is going,
Not to
employers
survive, to win.
need to
We need to
adapt.
make it. We don't want
Yes,
to just scrape by, right? We need to
right.
adapt to be a good employer so people
Well,
want to work with us.
absolutely. But
Yeah.
that's then going above and beyond just salary,
That's
so
my point. That's exactly my point. All right. So I have one last question
sure.
about that, and I know you probably processing the question from Tricia about the process for source candidates, but I'm going to ask you one other thing. So hopefully it's not too many questions at once. And this one is, I am completely curious. Pay transparency and um, autism spectrum. How does the diverse candidate with the neuro, sorry, I should have said neuro, how does the neurodiverse candidate interpret pay ranges? Are they looking at that as the same way as everyone else does? I'm going to pick the highest number, or is there a different
I'm
mechanism?
sorry,
Is it
I missed the part where
as
who.
a neurodiverse candidate yourself,
Uh-huh.
when you see a job posted
Mhm.
with a pay range,
Yep.
how do you interpret it? How do neurodiverse candidates interpret pay transparency?
Well, I can't speak on every neurodiverse, we can't,
Of
but I
course.
can say this from my perspective. I have to acknowledge that I have a unique experience and have been spending over a decade,
On this. Mhm.
recruiting and working
Yep.
with ranges and candidates and employers, whether staffing or internal. But at the end of the day, I'm always, it's easier to negotiate down than it is up. you know. So of course I'm going to look towards the top of the range, but also with the experience I have, and I realize that's a privilege I have. Um, I also know where the market falls. I follow it. I
Well, that's a good point.
am
Maybe the
making
candidate
sure,
educating themselves is a good is
absolutely. I
yeah.
believe that, and job seekers, another thing that from one of your first questions you asked is like, what am I seeing going on in the job market with
Mhm.
job seekers and the candidates experience job seeking? Candidates are, regardless of what, the misinformation that is on the internet,
Or
unfortunately,
lack of information, or
or
right.
lack, but they are smarter. They are, they're educating themselves to the
Mhm.
best of their ability, and they are truly trying to understand, in the best of their ability, what is going on, what is fair. It's my experience in the roles that I've been recently recruiting for, let's just say from January to today, um, that I have not spoken to one job seeker, whether they were a prospect or actually, in play and a candidate and applied for a role,
Mhm.
um, that has asked me for or requested a salary range that was disproportionate to their experience. Now sometimes that the range is, they're spot on for their experience, but they're applying for a role that requires less experience and is leveled for that, and so then we have that
Oh, okay.
conversation.
Right.
But
Yep.
as far as like apples to apples, I'm not seeing job seekers coming in and
With a huge
doing
disparity.
anything other than reasonably
Right.
advocating for themselves.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I appreciate that. If anybody in the audience has a perspective on how neurodiverse candidates see the pay transparency, um, and if they experience it different, that may be a good conversation to have. Maybe invite yourself to the next chat. Um, Next, I would like for you to see if you can address Tricia's question. Do you have any advice for how to change the process to improve on that HR black hole for sourced candidates? Because it's a different mechanism, right? I mean, both candidates, whether we source them or they come to us, both end up in the ATS, and they're supposed to be ending up in the same process. But the reality is that if we asked someone to come into the process, they're probably expecting and should be expecting more communication than a candidate who never got a response in the first place. So, what's your advice on, how are you solving for that? How would you solve for that?
I, well, black hole, and I mean, it's a it could mean many things. And I am neurodivergent and I do
Yeah.
focus on specifics, Trisha, but I want to say, for
Think about it
me,
as, how do you improve the candidate
right.
experience for a sourced candidate when it's a different process than an applicant?
Well, it's not a different process other than there's an initial outreach from me
Mhm.
reaching out to them,
Yep.
but they, whether I am sourcing, um, or whether someone has, found our career site or, a post on social media somewhere and applied on
Yep.
their own, the process is the same, other than how the job seeker found the role. The same conversations are being had about, our organization, the salary range, the role, the
Mhm.
hiring team, hiring, manager. Um, it's really not. It's different. Where I will say that an area that maybe Trisha is talking about, maybe, is around communication and the folks that you don't hire, Trisha, maybe, that are sourced, and the black hole that they go into potentially. I just want to make sure, we're answering for the right.
I think I'm interpreting this as, so this is my interpretation, and the reason I'm interpreting this is I have, the same question
Mhm.
myself. Um, if candidate A applied on the website
Right.
and has, um, you know, experience A, candidate B was asked to be interested, approached by
Mhm.
sourcing, and has the same experience as candidate A.
Mhm.
Is that correct, or shouldn't candidate B, who was sourced, have a different experience because we sourced them?
Not if the experience, and not if they're if they both have experience and both can be considered for the role. It should be. It, why would it be? I don't understand why we would treat candidates differently. We don't compare. We shouldn't compare candidate to candidate. We should be comparing every candidate to
To
the
the rec.
role and responsibilities.
That's right. But it's not that I think is the question. It's the, I'm interpreting Tricia. So Tricia, if, oh, I think she's agreeing with me. Okay, so the job was posted for 24 hours. This happened
Mhm.
actually to a job that I posted,
Okay. Yeah.
and within 24 hours, I got 2,000 applicants.
I. Yep. I relate.
I I hate to say it, and it pains me to say it, but I did not have the time to
Mhm.
review all 2,000 resumes. I also did not have the time to call all 2,000 people. And I also did not have the time to provide feedback to all 2,000 people as to why they weren't selected.
Well, no,
I'm
no
sorry. I just,
sourcer or recruiter can do that. That's not what I'm
but if I sourced somebody, I
Mhm.
definitely got them feedback on why they were rejected. And that is a different process.
So for me, and this just may be potato, Shally,
It could
you know
be.
what
I
I
don't
mean?
know. It could be.
But for me, when I reach out, say I apply for a role, and then a recruiter, sources you. The recruiter reaches out to you, and you haven't applied for the role yet. I'm gonna The recruiter's gonna find out in that call whether or not you're going to move forward. And if they're not going to encourage you to apply. At least that's how I handle it.
Hmm.
It's an informational sort of type conversation to learn about the candidate or the potential candidate, the prospect,
To see if they're interested,
and
right?
see if they're interested, and to also explain to them about your culture, the organization, everything you have going on in that
Mhm.
department, hiring manager, um, and what your company or what this role can offer the candidate, because they're equally important. If they're not qualified, I'm telling them right then, like,
Right.
oh gosh, I
What about
reached
the other
out.
2,000 people that applied? Are you telling them?
I am, but it's in an email if I haven't spoken with them.
Ah, okay. What if it's a referral?
Referrals, um,
Same process?
referrals, like internal referrals.
No, I mean, well, let me clarify. What if the candidate is not sourced and they
Mhm.
didn't apply, but
Mhm.
someone at the company knows someone and referred that candidate to apply
Yes, then I am going to talk to that candidate and start with an informational interview
as if they were sourced?
as
Okay.
if they were sourced. Because they technically are. They're just sourced by another one of my team members.
What if they were presented by a search firm?
Um, that's a great question. At that point, they're not my sourced candidate or my candidate
You've accepted
until
them.
I say they are, I guess.
So it's the search
Right now,
firm's candidate.
it's
I gotcha.
I text
Yep.
you, we're doing a lot of strategic hiring, not high volume hiring
Mhm.
right now. And I'll say that, we're not currently working with agencies. We have in the past, and, I'm sure we
And
will
you
in
will
the
in the future,
future.
right? Right. Okay. Yeah. Good. So yeah, I think really what the bottom of Tricia's question is, if there's this, lots of candidates that applied for this job, and we don't have time to do what we talked about with the source candidate, that there is a slightly different process. In other words, you might send them as Rachel said here. Essentially, the answer is you might send all of them a notification that the position has been closed and they weren't selected. You could say we've received lots of applications, and we encourage you to apply for other jobs, but this one's been filled. You could
Yeah,
say, so at least you're informing them, but it's not the same as having had a conversation with them because they're sourced, because you actually had a conversation with them before they even applied. So
right.
it is a slightly different process at the beginning. Now, past that, I think what Rachel's saying is that once you get past that and
Hmm.
they're now an applicant in the ATS, then the rest of that should be the same process. I think that's what you meant.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, whether you're, sourcing somebody or meet someone on the street as a hiring manager, employee in a company, or an HR or recruitment, um, until somebody actually, is an applicant, they're not, you may be being considered, but it's not official. So, and I know we're running out of time here. I see LinkedIn user, said save source candidates from applying until it's determined they're moving forward. And I
That means
definitely,
they're interested in your interest. In
right.
other words, you think they're qualified and they should
Mhm.
apply, and they agree that they're qualified
Right.
and
And
they're
I will say,
interested,
I
then move
agree.
forward.
But I also want to say a unique perspective just to add to this, because I
Yeah.
agree. And
And yes, and
I am a, yes, I am a, one woman recruiting shero show as far as, uh, being in the actual recruitment, trenches with candidates. And I am not always able to be everything to everyone. So there are times where I will not be able to speak to someone right off the bat, and I'll encourage them to take a look at the role. I can see on paper they're clearly qualified, like please apply, to save time.
mhm,
Uh, but I see where LinkedIn user is definitely coming from, and I really appreciate that. I think hopefully the biggest takeaway from this, at least from coming from me, for anybody listening, is that it's up we all need to show each other grace, from the employer
yeah,
side.
yeah,
Employers need to
kindness.
show candidates and job seekers and just human people some, grace, as well as I'm a recruiter and would love to, I what keeps me up at night is not being able to support job seekers, whether they're applying for my roles or other roles in other companies. I,
Right.
I wish I could triple, make 10 of me.
Right, exactly, right, and that's I think a very common sentiment amongst recruiters who care about candidate experiences, that we'd love to help everybody, but we are limited by who we're able to help. I mean, you can't Even the world's richest billionaire can't save the world by giving everybody $1 billion. It's, there's only so much time, energy, effort, attention, etc. So we do what we can.
Right.
Um,
But we
yeah.
can, and it starts with providing an equitable candidate experience,
Mhm.
that's what's within my control.
Right. Your
As
candidates
you
have
know,
that. Yeah. Yeah. You can start there. Perfect. Yes. And then if you can't change the pay transparency at your company, you can start by working towards that, asking for it, doing
yeah.
your homework, and yeah.
And whether you're a
Yeah.
recruiter or whether you're in marketing or engineering, like these are conversations you can start having. If it's not take, if pay transparency is not important, at least to start getting the conversation going internally.
It is important, but some companies are sort of stuck, right?
Yeah.
Rachel, I want to thank you very much for everything that you've brought today to the table. And I know that we're close to wrapping up here, but I have one question I ask. Hopefully they prepared you for this. If not,
No,
I'm
I'm
sorry to spring it.
excited.
I have actually two questions. I'm going to start a
Oh,
new thing now.
I'm gonna drink a water here.
Two questions that I want to ask you. The first one is, who should I interview next?
Oh goodness. There's so many exceptional people.
Pick
Uh,
one. You can't pick them all.
I would say Nicole Roberts.
Okay. All right. We'll invite
You
her.
haven't.
All right. And the second question is, this is what I've always asked at the end of these programs. Um, is there something that you would like our audience members to think about? So this isn't a question. It's more of a um, food for thought, something that you want them to consider, chew on mentally, if you will, over the weekend or as after they. So what do you want them to think about after this call?
I, I want them to think about, regardless of where their seat is in an organization, whether they're employed or unemployed, a recruiter, or in another type of role. Just think about the human experience, and think about, in your interactions with one another. Um, I guess I would say, just remember we're all human, because and it goes back to showing one another grace, because we are all having this
Mhm.
human experience, and having one traumatic experience after another. For a lot of folks, I think it's felt like in the last few years, or even lifetime, depending on
Mhm.
your own personal experiences. So just remembering that everyone is human. And I'm going to say, and I encourage job seekers, keep researching, keep asking questions, and hold recruiters and employers accountable. But remember, I hate using this quote, Rome wasn't built in a day. So be a part of helping be part of the change. And I definitely encourage other recruiters, HR folks, sourcers, and hiring managers to also remember that what this market is like currently. It's twice as much for a loaf of bread. Job seekers are really struggling right now. Unemployed folks are really struggling right now, regardless of the region that they live in. So let's just show each other some grace all around.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, be kind.
Yes.
Definitely. I appreciate that. Well, thank you
Thank
so much.
thank
Appreciate your time,
you.
and have a great weekend, everybody. We will see you on the next Jolly's Alley. And I'm going to echo Rachel, be kind to everyone.
Yes.
All
Thank
right.
you
Take
all.
care.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.